Hey, what's up? Justin here. Welcome to 65 Drums, the place to keep on top of everything e-drum related. Today I want to answer a question that I recently got about whether or not it's important to have an electronic drum set that has the hi-hat on the drum rack versus a hi-hat on the drum stand, like this Roland VH11 right here. Now, this is a really good question because there are times when you have two drum sets that are kind of sort of similar in price, except that one has the hi-hat on the stand and one has the hi-hat on the drum rack itself. So one really good example of this is the Yamaha DTX5 32K versus the Yamaha DTX5 22K. Both of those are really similar to each other. In fact, all the pads are identical except for the crash cymbal, which is a slight upgrade even though it's the exact same size. But the real upgrade is really the hi-hat stand because it just feels nicer to play on. So the question is that hi-hat really worth an extra $200? Now, in my particular case, where I came from playing an acoustic drum set and then I switched over to electronic, playing a hi-hat on a dedicated hi-hat stand is very important to me. It keeps the acoustic feel. Now, I realize there's some people that say, electronic drum sets don't need to feel like acoustic drums and they're their own instrument and all that stuff. That's nice to say, but when you grow up playing an acoustic drum set and you switch over to mostly playing electronic drums, you got to get something that feels natural to you and something that looks nice on stage as well. And I think that we can all agree that having a hi-hat on a stand it feels more natural from an acoustic perspective and it has a nicer stage presence to it. In fact, I would even say that the mark of an intermediate drum set is the fact that it has a hi-hat on a stand, because beginner drum sets always have them on the drum rack. When you start to see drum sets that actually have them on a stand itself, that's when you know you're starting to get into nicer electronic drum territory. So that being said, let's go take a look at different electronic drum sets that actually have them on stands. And we're just going to look at a bunch of different price ranges because it really varies from brand to brand. So the cheapest one that I could find of a decent drum set that has a hi-hat on the stand is still that Yamaha drum set, the 532K. Now, going up in price a little bit from that Yamaha drum set, we have the Percussion KT4 for $1,200. Now, I actually happen to own this drum set. This is the hi-hat from that set right here. If you want to see my full review on whether or not the drum set's actually worth buying, I'll try to link that in the description below if I remember to do that. But the weird thing about this hi-hat is the fact that the controller piece that sits underneath this thing, it actually has to be plugged into the wall. This is the only drum set I've ever played where you actually have to plug in the controller piece to the wall. In fact, the power adapter, the power brick, has like a split. So one half you plug into the drum module and the other one splits off and you plug it into the hi-hat stand. It's really weird, but it's one of the reasons why I actually bought the drum set, the fact that it's on a stand, because that's something that I need to have from any electronic drum set I personally am about to buy. Again, it changes from person to person. Some people don't even care whether or not it's on a stand or on the drum rack itself. And this brings up an important point. For people that have been playing electronic their entire lives, it might not be as big of a deal. If you came from acoustic, it probably will be a little bit more of a deal. But going back to the Percussion KT4, you have a really similar matchup here. For $1,000, you can buy the Percussion KT3, and then for $1,200, you can buy the Percussion KT4. Again, you got that $200 price difference. Now, in this case, however, there's a module upgrade. The Percussion KT3 is not as nice. It doesn't sound anywhere near as nice as the Percussion KT4. So in this matchup right here, I would pick the KT4 again and again just because you have the hi-hat on the stand, and of course you have a much better sounding drum module. It probably actually still is the best sounding budget drum module there is out there. Alright, so let's switch over to Roland for a second. What's the cheapest electronic drum set that they have that has a hi-hat on a stand? And in this case, it's always going to be the VH11 hi-hat pad. This is a gold standard. Tons of people buy this even for non-Roland drum sets such as an Elisa's Strike. So the cheapest drum set that comes with one of these guys is the Roland TD25K. And unfortunately, that thing starts out at $1,999. Now, we all know that Roland never comes cheap, but it is kind of interesting to see that they're holding the hi-hat feature at $2,000, and there's nothing cheaper you can get at that has the VH11 on a stand. But the good news is you don't have to buy a brand new drum set. If you don't want to mortgage your house, you don't have to. Go find a used Roland drum set. Some of my favorite places to look for used gear is Facebook Marketplace. Number one, because you can actually see a photo of the person you're going to meet. Number two, you know their actual real name. And then, of course, there is Craigslist, which is basically like Facebook Marketplace, except that you have no idea who the heck they are. And then there's Reverb.com. There's eBay, where I bought my drum set. So there are lots of places out there you can find used gear. And if you want to look at different generations of Roland drum modules that actually had this exact same hi-hat, here are a couple that you should take a look at. The previous one was the Roland TD15 KV. Now, if you go to eBay and type in Roland Roland TD15 KV and then click completed listings, this is pretty important because this will show you drum sets that have actually been sold. So you can see what people have actually paid for these, not what people are currently trying to get from you. You can see that the average price for a TD15 KV is around $1,300 with about 52 bucks in shipping. So that's really not that bad. In fact, that's cheaper than a Roland TD11 KV, and that won't even give you the hi-hat on the stand. So for way less than 2,000 bucks, you get a pretty nice drum module, which some people actually like more than the TD25. It really depends on you. You can get a very respectable intermediate range electronic drum set, and it's definitely worth checking out. Here's a quick pro tip for you guys that are looking for used electronic drums. A lot of times, people will make a lot of different upgrades to their drum set and then claim it's the KV version. As we all know, whenever Roland makes a drum set, they'll always make it in K and KV versions. The K versions have the bass pads, the KV versions have the nicer pads. Sort of like if you look at cars and you see that has an S on the end of it, that means that it's got a nicer engine or nicer seats or something like that. Same thing for electronic drums. So take a look at this drum set right here. They're claiming it's a Roland TD15 KV, but unfortunately it's not. You can see it's a Roland TD11 KV because of the drum module. Whenever the drum module is that shape and it's black, that means it's a TD11. Whenever it's silver, that means it's a TD15. Now they did upgrade it. It's actually a TD11 KV with an upgraded hi-hat. So it's got the VH11, it's got what you're looking for. But if you're looking for more sounds and better pads, because those have the really stupid plastic ring around them, if you want the more upgraded pads, you'll have to go buy one of the actual TD15 KVs. Just keep an eye out for that. Sometimes people make upgrades to a drum set and they'll think to themselves, oh, I made enough upgrades to this, I'll just call it something different because I've upgraded it to that point, when it really isn't. So the Roland TD15 KV is the previous generation version of what's now the Roland TD25 KV. But if you go back even one more generation, you can still buy Roland TD29 KX2. Again, this is the previous version of the TD15. If you buy like a heavily modified, spec'd out one like this one right here, you can get them for around $1,600 to get, two crash cymbals, a ride cymbal, the VH11 hi-hat stand, very large mesh pads. So you're basically getting a Roland TD25 KV except with an older drum module. That's really what you're getting right here. And they even upgraded the kick drum right there. There are other times you can get really, really lucky. Like you can buy this Roland TD29 KX2 with flight cases. Someone walked away with this thing for $1,000. That's insane. The used market at times can be sort of like a lottery. You'll get ripped off without even knowing it, or other times you'll get incredibly lucky like this guy, where he walked away with his drum set for $1,000. And of course, I can't go without mentioning, you can always go buy a drum set that's kind of like low level and then do some upgrades afterwards with used parts in order to bring it up to wherever you want it to be. For example, you could buy Roland TD11, go buy VH11 hi-hat. You can buy those brand new for $400 or $200 used on eBay. There are things you can do. You don't always have to go buy a brand new drum set with really spec'd out, really nice. You can always go buy a lower end drum set and then upgrade it from there. So there's a million ways to attack this problem. So before we switch over to talking about Alesis and all their drum sets that have hi-hats on stands, I want to mention one last thing about Roland products. Even though they have a great reputation for being nearly indestructible, they do fail sometimes. It's like a myth that says they never break. They do break sometimes. For example, this is a VH11 hi-hat controller piece, and this one, it's just not working properly for me. So I've started using a Go eDrum hi-hat controller piece instead. But yeah, even though this is cheaper, I'm using it right now because it works and this one doesn't. Roland drum sets, if you buy them used, they give you the best odds that they'll work, but eventually every drum product breaks. Okay, so let's move on to Alesis. The cheapest drum set that they sell that has a hi-hat on the stand is the Alesis Strike. Now remember, there's two different flavors of this. You have the Alesis Strike and the Strike Pro. A bunch of people keep asking me whether or not there's a difference between those two drum sets. Like, is the module nerfed? Do they have less sounds or anything? No, actually the drum modules are completely the same. The pads are completely the same. Just one drum set has more pads and one doesn't. One has more cymbals, one doesn't. So this cheaper one costs $1,700. I've gotten a chance to play two Alesis Strike Pros, and while the hi-hats technically work, the responsiveness of them just doesn't compare to Yamaha hi-hats, Roland hi-hats, and apparently the new ATV hi-hats are incredible as well. They're just not on that same level. Now, I've personally gotten a chance to play two Alesis Strike Pros. One was at somebody's house. I got a chance to play the Alesis Strike Pro and also the Pearl Mimic module with that. Had a lot of fun doing that. And the hi-hat was way better than when I played it for a second time at Sweetwater over in Indiana. That is a great music store. Those guys know a lot. But unfortunately, the drum set was not set up well, and a bunch of pads weren't even working. Like a crash cymbal wasn't working, the hi-hat was not responding properly, and it probably didn't have the latest update either. So I've had two wildly different experiences playing this drum set. On the one hand, when I played it at the store, it was complete garbage and I would never dream of buying it. When it was at somebody's house where they, spent time on the settings and stuff, it was definitely playable. It was a lot of fun to play. I would still take a TD25 over it, personal choice, but I did see why people were buying it because it was fun to play and the hi-hats were usable. So it really depends. You got to make sure that you install the software update and do a lot of tweaking and stuff. But even then, some people are just buying an Elisa Strike and then they're buying a VH11 hi-hat because they work together. So they'll throw away the Elisa Strike hi-hats or maybe use it as an extra crash cymbal or something, and then they'll buy a Roland VH11 or VH12 and use that instead. So unfortunately, this is the cheapest drum set that Elisa makes that has a hi-hat, but unfortunately that hi-hat is only usable. It's not great. They haven't figured out hi-hats like Roland has or Yamaha has. Apparently hi-hats are just really hard to get right. The funny thing about the Elisa Strike hi-hats is that even though they look really different from the Elisa's X hi-hats and the Pearl True Track hi-hats, the internals are really darn similar when you open them up and take a look at them. The only difference between these $100 hi-hats and the Elisa Strike hi-hats is the top piece. At least that's what it looks like from first glance. They look really similar as far as the internals go. So going back to the original question that sparked this video, how important is it for you to buy a drum set that has a hi-hat on the stand versus a hi-hat on the drum rack itself? Does it really matter? On the one hand, if you're on a budget, just go with what you can afford. I never want people to go broke buying a drum set because it's really not worth it. On the other hand, if your budget allows, I always would rather spend the extra couple $100s to buy the drum set that actually has the hi-hat on the stand itself. Because coming from an acoustic drummer's perspective, it just feels a lot more natural. There's a lot of things going for it and even looks nicer on stage. For those reasons, I recommend buying a hi-hat that's on a stand if you can. There are budget options out there. You can buy used electronic drum sets that have the hi-hats on the stands. There are a lot of different ways to achieve this, and I think it's worth going the extra mile, spending a little bit more money in order to get that. Now, of course, we've all been in this buying situation before, so I want to know what your take is on this. Do you think the hi-hat on the stand is a really important thing, or is it just a nice to have, but you don't really need it? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Hope you guys have an amazing day. See you in a few.